Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African Americans and the institutional church. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about African Americans and the institutional church, Dr. Herbert Marbury. Dr. Marbury is a professor at Vanderbilt University. And Dr. Marbury, let me welcome you to the show this morning and tell you how delighted we are to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. It's good to be here.
Very good.
Thank you for having me.
What I'd like to do this morning, Dr. Marbury, is to talk about some aspects of African Americans and the institutional church. But before we do that, let's get into some information that will give our audience about you, your background, your education, and some of the things that are important in your life. And then we'll have an opportunity during this first segment to deal with that. And then we'll have our break and we'll come back and deal with African Americans and the institutional church. Let's do it from that perspective.
Right. Well, I was born here in Nashville, Tennessee. My father was here serving as the chaplain at the prison prior to the prison that preceded Riverbend. And my mother came to join him, left a career in social work and teaching to join him. And we lived here for about a year and a half. Moved to Atlanta soon after that. And I grew up in Atlanta as a son of the church. Third generation United Methodist minister on my father's side, and fifth generation United Methodist minister on my mother's side. And I grew up in those kinds of churches where each and every day God was made relevant to the issues that we faced, the challenges that people face, particularly black churches and those black congregations that cared about the world that we had to deal with. And so you didn't have to wonder whether God was real, and you didn't have to wonder whether the love of God was real. You felt it inside those caring communities. And so those are the kind of churches that shaped me. And in that regard, I became a son of the church, a deep love for the church, particularly the black church. I grew up in Atlanta, went on to go to Emory University, where I studied English literature and African American studies, double major. Went on to study at Gammon Theological Seminary at ITC, and studied biblical studies and theology, and finally completed my education here again in Nashville, where I took a PhD in religion at Vanderbilt. Along the way, I met some, and I was shaped by some significant faculty members, professors like Dr. Charles Cofer, who is considered the father of African American biblical studies, and Randall Bailey, who taught me, was my first Old Testament teacher at ITC. And here, my advisor was Dr. Renita Weems, who directed my dissertation. Dr. Cofer taught me the importance of cultural context in the Bible, look particularly at African context and finding not only myself, but my community in the text. And Randall Bailey taught us how to think critically about the problems we faced and how those problems were made relevant in our own interpretations. And finally, Dr. Renita Weems really took me and honed me and made me a scholar. Any faults I have are my own, but what I find that's good in my work has to do with the caliber of instruction I got from great professors. And so I'm grateful for my journey. Along the journey, what I found to be most important, not just the education that I got, but the experience I got along the way. I served as pastor of Old National United Methodist Church for several years in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was one of those congregations that accepted a young student pastor and taught me that while it was extraordinarily important that I studied hard, but it was also important that I took what I knew. And I knew, not only did I know the books, but I had to know the lives of the people. I had to understand where religion, if you will, where religion hit the ground. In other words, where the rubber met the road, and the kinds of difficulties that real people faced as they attempted to live faithful lives. And so I was blessed to be the pastor of that church for several years, where I really learned not only how to care for and lead a community, but I also learned why biblical interpretation is so important for our churches. I left there and served as the university chaplain at Clark Atlanta University for several years. And there I met some of the brightest and most inquisitive students who really pushed me to think not only outside of my education, but also to think outside of the confines of regular churches.
Very good. And of course, what we're going to, excuse me, Doctor, what we're going to do is to take our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and complete some of the information that you're giving us now. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Was she at Vanderbilt University?
Yes, she was my advisor at Vanderbilt, yes.
That's, when was that? When she advised you at Vanderbilt University?
That would have been 97, 98.
Yeah, I think I met her about that time.
Yeah, I was till about 2002. I graduated 2002, 2003, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I know Professor Weems.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the second segment, and this is when we'll start talking about the institutional. I'll introduce the show itself. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Herbert Marbury from Vanderbilt University, and he's giving us some information in reference to the institutional church. And he's also given us some excellent information concerning his background and some of the experiences that led him to us this morning. And so, Dr. Marbury, let's see if we might be able to pick up where we left off and to have you to start talking about African Americans and the institutional church from your perspective.
Well, I think what's foundational for the institutional church for African Americans, and perhaps foundational for most churches, but particularly for black churches, is the Bible. You find it in the pulpits. We preach from it. It is our authority for our moral life, and it is for most Christian communities the Word of God. And I tell my students, every time they step into a pulpit in the midst of a community of believers and they speak from the Bible, they are speaking for that community. What is the Word of God? And so one of the things that captured my attention when I was a student at ITC and then later at Vanderbilt, had good professors like Professor Victor Anderson and Professor Lewis Baldwin, who interests me not only in ethics, that is how black communities think about what's right and wrong, but also interested me in the history of the black church. And from that standpoint, I wanted to know, well, why do churches in general think of the Bible and use the Bible so differently? For example, you look in Nashville and you've got churches from one end of the city to the other. And on fundamental issues, we disagree, and yet the same book is being preached from our pulpits. And I began to wonder, well, what's going on? It's not the book is the same. What's going on in the way that we interpret these texts?
It's the interpretation of the books.
Absolutely, it's the way. And so I wanted to study how African Americans historically have interpreted the Bible. And so that's the reason I wrote Pillars of Cloud and Fire. It begins to look at African American biblical interpretation from the antebellum period, starting with slavery. And I look at various examples. A radical example and a conservative example in the antebellum period, beginning with Absalom Jones and David Walker. I move on to look at Reconstruction with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and John Jasper. The Harlem Renaissance with Zora Neale Hurston. Then the era of civil rights with Adam Clayton Powell and Martin Luther King Jr. And finally, I look at the era of Black Power with Albert Clegg. Each one takes up the book of Exodus, but takes it up in a very different way. And they take it up based on what I talked about earlier. That is, what are the relevant challenges that my community faces? How can I continue to make the Word of God, the Bible, relevant? And so during the antebellum period, Absalom Jones and David Walker both take up the story of Exodus almost literally. That if God delivered the children of Israel from Egypt, across the Red Sea into the Promised Land, then God will do the same. And the Promised Land was freedom from slavery. Well, freedom from slavery came, and we weren't free. We faced Jim Crow and segregation. And so if you go to the era of Reconstruction, and you look at sermons, the Promised Land doesn't look like freedom from slavery. Emancipation is no longer identified with the Promised Land. Uplift is. Well, how do we educate now? How do we move from just emancipation to education and the kind of cultural attainment that will lift Black communities? And after Reconstruction, that changes again in the Harlem Renaissance. This idea that we need to throw off the manacles of slavery, the old Southern sort of African American
rebirth.
And a rebirth. That's right. The Renaissance man. Renaissance man, Renaissance woman. But for the Harlem Renaissance writers, for the most part, except for Zora Neale Hurston, they were really thinking rather in sexist terms. So they were thinking the new Negro was the new Negro man. But Zora Neale Hurston, I thought, was one of the most interesting figures during that time. Her Moses, Man of the Mountain, helped African Americans rethink the Exodus story in a way that took the focus off a singular figure, like a Moses figure, and put it on the community, and asked us to imagine together what it would mean if we all together walked into the Promised Land and we weren't waiting for or dependent upon one singular figure or God to send one person to deliver a whole group of people. And then I go on to look at the era of civil rights with Adam Clayton Powell and Martin Luther King Jr., who understood the Exodus story and the Promised Land as being included as full citizens, that we would certainly enjoy, as Dr. Martin Luther King would say, the blessings of liberty. And if you look at his speeches, he takes the rhetoric from the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the kind of rhetoric that founded our nation, and he connects it to the Exodus story. And freedom means becoming a full citizen. Well, at a certain point, by the end of the Civil Rights Movement, we find that Albert Clegg wants to do something very different with that. That there's the frustration that has risen because African Americans still aren't enjoying the blessings of liberty. There is a move to take that story and to claim it for ourselves and to claim the power to change our lives. Not that power, but not placing it in the founding documents, but placing it in Black communities themselves. And so we get the Black Power movement. So I wanted to look at the various ways that we have interpreted one singular book, the book of Exodus, over the course of a long period of time. But my concern was to show that each interpreter started first with the concerns of their community at that time. And I wanted to encourage my students who are going to serve churches and serve in religious communities to do the same.
You know, during this second segment, the final segment, what I would like for you to do is to, and I think you've mentioned Adam Clayton Powell and Dr. Martin Luther King. I think that these are two giants, but I think that people know more about Dr. King than they do about Adam Clayton Powell. And so during this final segment, when we come back, we've got about 45 or 50 seconds here. But when we come back during this final segment, what I'd like for you to do, and I say this now because I don't want to forget to push it forward. I want you to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King and Adam Clayton Powell, and with emphasis upon Adam Clayton Powell and why he is significant and what the things that you've been doing. Okay? And so what we'll do, we'll take this final commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll deal with some aspects of Dr. Martin Luther King and Adam Clayton Powell. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. You look like you've been doing this all your life, man.
I got no, this is my first time.
Oh, man, you're good. Because you got the information. That's what makes you good. See, when you have the information, and you can do it.
Yeah,
see, and so when we come back during this final segment, I'll introduce the show again. But and in case I forget, but what I'd like for you to do is to look at these two personalities in the context of all the things that you've studied about them and writing your book and books and et cetera, and to look and to examine those two individuals, Dr. Martin Luther King and Adam Clayton Powell, and point out whatever the similarities or difficulties and et cetera, whatever you want to talk about. But I think that would be good to end this, because these are the two most important individuals in terms of contemporary black society and the institutional church. You see, and I'd like to know more about about this myself. You see, and so when we come back, we'll do that. We'll do this. We will have, excuse me, we'll have 10 minutes to do this. I need some water myself. Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you. Now, Herbert Marbury.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, well, I have to do that every time. You're giving us some excellent, and I don't want to make any noise. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Herbert Marbury from Vanderbilt University, and he's giving us some information in reference to African Americans and the institutional church. Doctor, let's see if we might be able to pick up during this final segment to talk about what I consider to be two very, very significant individuals that you've already mentioned, Dr. Martin Luther King and Adam Clayton Powell. And let's see what you know about those individuals and how they fit into what we're trying to do at this particular time.
Right. Well, in the chapter on the Civil Rights Movement, I take up Dr. King and Adam Clayton Powell as a pillar of cloud and fire. Dr. King as a pillar of cloud, and and Adam Clayton Powell as a pillar of fire. And when I say pillar of fire, I mean someone who kind of brandished, if you will, his brashness, a boldness, a certain radical nature. Adam Clayton Powell was very clear while he was in Congress that he called himself the baddest Negro in Congress.
Yeah, go on.
And he flouted the rules. He didn't stomach segregation. He didn't take kindly to the kinds of conventions that made African Americans second class. And part it had to do with his upbringing, had to do with who he was, but it also had to do with, I think, growing up in Harlem. And he really was, I call him, a son of the Harlem Renaissance. He was the new Negro, as I understand it, that the Harlem Renaissance writers had hoped for. He started one of the first boycotts of the public transportation system in Harlem. One of the first sort of public service programs at his church at Abyssinian Baptist Church. And by the time he went to Congress, he was pastoring the largest Protestant congregation in the nation. Adam Clayton Powell is known for his he's not only known for his pastoral work, but he's known for the Powell Amendment, which was a little known sort of codicil that he would add to every bill that sent funding for public accommodations, and it was a bill that said that public funding could not be used for segregated institutions. It angered Southern segregationists throughout the country, but it also angered African Americans because some of those schools were African American schools in the South. Although they were segregated, they were starved because they also needed the public funding. But Clayton Powell didn't care. What he was concerned about was ensuring that those who wanted segregation had to pay for it. And so he starved them all to death until he was able to get the Civil Rights Bill in 1964. That was his victory in the Civil Rights Bill of 64. He was there when Lyndon Baines Johnson signed it, but so was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And King, who was, they were both princes of the Black Baptist Church. Clayton Powell had gone to, attended school in New York. His father, his father, in many ways, had groomed him to be a prince of the Baptist Church. Martin Luther King,
as Dr. King,
as Dr. King's father.
Good.
His father pastored Abyssinian, while Dr. King's father pastored Ebenezer, and they both groomed their sons for the roles that they would take. They both went to elite schools, Morehouse College in the South, and they both were products of the black middle class. But where they differed, I think, was Dr. King grew up in the segregated South, born right at 1929, just as America was going into the Great Depression. And Dr. King saw a different and a brutal side of white segregationist power. And it was something that I don't think Adam Clayton Powell saw. That shaped Dr. King in a way that that Adam Clayton Powell didn't.
And led to his assassination.
Yes, and led to his assassination. Absolutely. In a sense, both of them were assassinated. Dr. King, literally. Good. Adam Clayton Powell was politically destroyed because of his brashness. So what I find with now, both of them come at a time when African Americans have migrated, and I think this is also important to make the making of these two figures. African Americans began to migrate immediately after the Civil War. Every 10 years, you look at the census, you see more and more African Americans migrating toward the west and toward the north. Except for the 10 years during the Depression, when you don't see much migration, but you see, and so African Americans migrated from rural communities in the South to cities in the South like Montgomery and Atlanta. That created the possibility for a Montgomery bus boycott, but also created the possibility for an Abyssinian Baptist church, which was Adam Clayton Powell's political base, and which became for Martin Luther King the base for the Montgomery bus boycott and Ebenezer. And so as these two figures began to interpret the biblical text, they thought of the Exodus story for Adam Clayton Powell. The Exodus story guaranteed for African Americans in his sermon, "Stop Blaming Everyone Else," which he preached at Abyssinian Baptist Church in the 50s. It was a sermon that invited African Americans to fully participate in what it meant to be a citizen, take responsibility for what it meant to be a citizen.
He really pushed African Americans.
He pushed African Americans to take responsibility for it. And so for Martin Luther King Jr., however, there was a different way of understanding the biblical text. Martin Luther King Jr., growing up in the South, personal piety became very important. In as much as his political work, personal piety became a mask, if you will, for Martin Luther King Jr. He knew that if he was leading African Americans out into the streets to demand full inclusion, He knew how to use the television cameras, how to use the public square, and the way he used it was to lead African Americans into acts of personal piety. That's what I call the pillar of cloud. He masked, in many ways, his real intentions. He would lead them to pray in the streets, to sing songs. And when the television cameras came and they saw African Americans living out some of the, these kind of virtuous these virtuous expressions, right? Singing church songs, praying, holding hands, praying for their enemies. Not only was the South was embarrassed, the nation was embarrassed, but they were not only embarrassed domestically, they were embarrassed internationally. And so I call that the pillar of cloud because just as a cloud kind of blends in seamlessly, Martin Luther King's tactics blended in with the American moral landscape. These were virtues for America.
And this was also Dr. Martin Luther King behind the veil.
Yes.
And you know more about that because
Yes.
of one of your professors, I'm sure.
Dr. Baldwin.
Dr. Baldwin,
Right.
who talked about
Right.
that and et cetera. And I think that
Yes.
you're an excellent reflection
Yes.
in terms of what he said about that and some of the things that you're saying
Yes.
about that. And I want you to know that the information that you're giving us now is very, very precious.
Right.
And I think that understanding these two individuals
Right.
and some of the things that they faced and how different they were, one from the north and one from the south, but yet and still they had the same commitment, and while they went about it differently, they had the same commitment in terms of the uplift of African Americans to eventually reach the promised land.
Right.
And I think that that's what we're still trying to move toward.
And that's
Is
that's what we're still trying. That's what I hope that as you read my book, but as we think about biblical interpretation today, we face police shootings of Black and brown, African American and Hispanic, unemployment, high underemployment, and questions around whether or not we can provide adequate education and health care. And I want to know, why is it that we have to go out into the streets to hear the word of God that Black Lives Matter? Why not in the church? Now, to be sure, there's some churches who are doing that. But my question is, how do we interpret the Bible in ways that are relevant for us?
Very good. Let me thank you,
Yes.
Doctor, during this last few seconds for coming by and giving us that
Thank you.
excellent information. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much.
Hawkins, and James Watkins.
Just give me a mic check. Just count to 10 for me.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay.
Okay, you good? Count to 10 for me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Yes, sir. My name is Dr. James Haney. And okay. Okay, so what we'll do, Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Watkins, is to maybe, let's see, you say you've been involved in this for 20 odd years, dealing. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is child support in Tennessee. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about child support in Tennessee, Mr. James Watkins and Mr. Phil Hawkins. And of course, let me welcome you, Mr. Watkins and Mr. Hawkins, to the show. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is child support in the state of Tennessee. And we're fortunate to have to talk about child support in the state of Tennessee, Mr. James Watkins and Mr. Phil Hawkins, both individuals who have quite a bit of information in reference to child support in the state of Tennessee. And of course, Mr. Watkins, let's have you and Mr. Hawkins to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences. And then after this first segment is over, then we'll be able to get into the second segment dealing with child support in Tennessee. First, let's give you about 2.5 or 3 minutes to talk about your background, your education, and some of your experiences, and after which Mr. Hawkins will do the same.
All right. My name is James Watkins. I'm a 44-year-old male. My background is I'm the president of the Dads Against Destruction. It's a program we try to help dads change their lives around to making better choices, decisions where they're going in life. My background in education, I attended Whites Creek Comprehensive High School. I left school in 1991. I left from there. I didn't graduate, but I did a few years later, wind up getting my GED. Then after I received my GED, I went on off to college in Flathead Valley Community College. That's in Montana, Kalispell, Montana. So that's my education. And what I have to deal with child support is I've been dealing with child support for over 20 years. I have 2 adult kids, and the situation with that is the way it's been explained to me is I'll be paying child support, the rest of my life due to the way the state has set things up, to where that you're not just only paying child support, but you also paying interest fees and back this and back that, and to where I'm paying more to the state than I'm paying to the child support right now.
And so in a real sense, what you're saying here, Mr. Hawkins, Mr. Watkins, is that the state of Tennessee has some issues dealing with child support that the two of you and Mr. Hawkins will be able to talk about. But first, let's get some information from you, Mr. Hawkins, Phil Hawkins, in reference to your background, education, and what really brought you to us this morning.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to thank you for us being here. I'm Phil Hawkins, the CEO of Dads Against Destruction. What brought us here is that it's time for us to stand up, man up, and get this out. A lot of men don't even want to work no more these days. So we out here now trying to advocate for the men, to get the men back in the household and get the system back. Right now, the system trying to raise our kids, and it can't happen like that.
And so in a real sense, let's since you've been involved with child support in the state of Tennessee for quite a while, let's give our audience some information in reference to what we mean in reality when we say child support in Tennessee, who has to pay it and how much you have to pay it and how long you have to pay it. Let's do it from that perspective.
The way it's set up, from my understanding, it's supposed to be for 18 years until your child turns 18 years old. Then it can go even further because of they're going to college and stuff. I can understand all that, but situations in life happen. Man's job might slow down at different points of the season, to where he's not able to make his whole payment, or he might lose a job, or just things happen. But that doesn't stop child support from running, and as it keeps running, if you miss, it's like a credit. If you miss a payment, if you don't pay your whole full balance, they're gonna charge you a late fee. And this is how I feel about it, because I'm paying late fees every day, all day long, because of I'm just might be slow on getting the payment, makes me slow at work and stuff, and I'm not even making a payment. But it's just a system to where it's like it makes you feel like the state getting more out of it than the child is.
And so, Mr. Hawkins, what we're saying is that when we talk about child support, we're not just talking about a simple kind of thing of buying diapers and baby food and et cetera for a certain time. But I think as Mr. Watkins has indicated, that he has been involved in it for more than 18, 20 odd years. And so, what we're going to do, Mr. Hawkins, is to take this first commercial break. We've got about a half a minute. Okay. And when we come back, we want you to talk about child support in the state of Tennessee by defining what we mean when we talk about child support and the impact that child support is having upon individuals. After when we come back, you give us some statements in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences, and then we'll get into that part of it, and that will allow us to first get a definition. Right. Because I think a large number of folks, when they think about child support, generally think in terms of buying baby bottles and et cetera, and et cetera. But it seems that we're talking about something that lasts 14, 15, 20 years, and I think that's a different situation. And so when we come back, I feel what we'll do is to allow you to start us off, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. About child support in Tennessee. This is where you start, because you're going to have 4 minutes at least before you turn it over to him. You listen to what he's saying, and anything that you think that you might be able to elaborate upon or whatever, or to expand it or whatever. I'm learning something, because I was of the impression that child support, I know there might be some situations in reference to it, but I didn't know it was a lifelong kind of situation.
A judge told me, he said, you'll be paying child support the rest of your life.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
Is that
program?
What he told me.
Yeah, program where the man can't win.
Well, that's what, if y'all see some problems with the issue of child support and et cetera, we're not talking about something that we're trying to neglect children or whatever, and et cetera. But what we're trying to indicate is that it creates a problem for...
big problem. I'm out now trying to get a bill passed, a law passed, to give men 90 days.
Okay. Okay, so okay, anytime you're ready then. Okay, so we're going to come back and... Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is child support in Tennessee, and we have with us to talk about child support in Tennessee, Mr. James Watkins and Mr. Phil Hawkins. And so, Mr. Hawkins, let's see if we can get some information from you, because we were unable to get it the last time, from you in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences that led you to us this morning, and then make some statements in reference to child support in Tennessee, and then we'll move to Mr. Watkins and allow him to sort of finish this segment for the morning. Okay.
Well, I came out of Glencliff High School, like my buddy here, didn't graduate, went through the system to graduate, get GED, and just got, going through life changes, ups and downs. But we also been in the child support system, like he said, 20, 30 years, where we can't win, and it's time for us to take back our stand on it. We keep falling for everything. We got to stand for something. And this child support thing, it got to be, well, the average man these days don't even want to work a job. They taking half his check, the child at home don't get the money, the state taking all their money, and then you left with $100, $200 to feed for 2 or 3 kids. So that's what we man up. We're taking up back our lives. We're addressing the issues now. It's time for us to, do what we need to do to get these fathers back home. Maybe we stop some of this gun violence, because the father's not there, he can't raise his kids. But if you bring a father in, he can discipline his kids. The state can't do it by itself no more.
Now, when we talk about child support, and I think a large number of members of our audience might think in terms of supporting that child for a certain amount of years and et cetera. But what's your view in terms of child support, which is to say that you are paying for your child,
yes, sir,
but at the same time there are some issues that you like to deal with?
Yes, sir. I found out just the other day, I'm advocating child support every day. I just found out the other day I was with my kid's mother, 24 years. And I just found out the other day I'm $139,000 behind on child support payments. So how that system add up? I was with my kids every day of their life, all 3 of them. But I'm behind, I take care of my kids. It's how the system is trying to portray us as not doing, but because we're not paying the system. But we keep paying the system, we can't we can't feed the child. We got to have something for a man to live.
And so are you still with your wife?
No, sir.
But you're still paying to support your children
every day.
And you feel that they're taking more money out of whatever salary you have,
yes, sir,
and some of that money does not go to the child.
None of the money go back.
But the money, for the most part, goes to the state.
Yes, sir.
Well, what do you think about that, Mr. Watkins?
I mean, it is true. As you just asked me, about going towards the child, it's true. I've had the mother me call me and ask me, well, when is your job going to send the money? I said, what do you mean? It's coming out of my check. Well, they send it when they want to send it. And it causes conflict within the household. I've lost a house. I lost my family. I've lost cars. I've lost jobs and everything. I've lost my freedom over child support. And, it took a real big toll on me mentally and emotionally because, I desire to be home with my kids. My kids are my everything. And to take me out of my home because I fell behind on a bill, that's like, come on, man, you're not just taking me out of home.
What do you mean when you say to take you out of your home? How does that?
When you take a person out of home, when you take a person's job from them, what is that man gonna do? He's gonna wind up trying to figure out a way to go out here and get some money. Right. Because if you love your kids, you're gonna revert to anything in the means necessary to get money to feed your kids or do what you can do. So yes, I've made some choices in life to where I started going towards the street life. Because of why? Because every time I turned around, I was getting harassed. I was getting harassed by the judges to the point to where they was like, well, this is the state law. So is it state law? Then okay, if I can't make this money, you taking all the money, my kids not getting paid, my lights getting cut off, this is happening. Well, I got to hurry up and go out here and find another way to get this money because not only am I hearing from you all, but I'm also hearing it from her. And when all that comes into play, it pushes a man outside that household to where he's looking to where, like, man, what am I gonna do? So when we sit up here, we look at these other young men out here on these streets and they trying to do different things. When I talk, when the first thing come out of their mouth, man, I gotta feed my kids, man. And it's like that's where that destruction come in. So me and Phil Hawkins, we have been through it and we have fought through many things to try to maintain a fatherly relationship with our kids and everything, which we still do. Just because they took us out the home don't mean we still ain't in our kids' lives. But we still try to educate the younger men, the future and everything to, hey, we're gonna try to get some help because I know where you've been, I know where you're going and stuff.
So, Phil, when you think in terms of child support in Tennessee, what would you consider to be the most destructive thing that the state of Tennessee is doing in order to either help you or prevent you from really supporting your children?
I mean, the first thing they're doing, they need to let the dads or father be a father. The state cannot raise or come in a household and raise kids. And that's what they're doing. They make sure the father's not there by leading the mother wrong. Make sure the father not there. So there you go. You got a son and daughter just being raised by the system. And we already know that's going to lead to a broken cycle. So we out here now trying to bring that cycle to fix the broken cycle. To get this right, bring the fathers back in the home, take care of the kids, take care of their families. It's just a man-up process. We need help with it.
And so if the state is paying that household child support, the father cannot be in the household. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir.
That's right.
And so which means that I think, as you were indicating, Mr. Watkins, that sort of pushes you out into the street.
Yeah,
you see, in order for her to receive.
A man is going to try to figure out some way to not only that you push that man outside that household, but he also got to go find a house to where he got to stay now.
Right.
So that's another bill. That's another situation where he got to he got to go and try to wind up in a shelter. You're going to wind up in a hotel. You're going to wind up in a friend's house. When you bouncing around in different places, trying to live and trying to provide and stuff, it takes away your self-esteem.
Down your spiral.
Yeah, and that's what we call destruction. So it's when it does a lot of good, but then also it does a lot of harm too. Because when you take that man out of that household, then you got these young boys running around here, and then you telling me I can't discipline my child. Then you go to school, you get in trouble, you get secret indictments out on you because of you discipline your child because your child stayed there. Well, the man in the household doing something wrong, so let's get him out of there. No, not every man is doing something destructive to tear his child down.
So there is, over the last 22 seconds we have in this segment, there is no father in a household where there is child support.
Right.
Right.
And the ones there, the state still want their money too.
Yeah.
That's
I've
a
been
no
through
win
that.
battle.
And that creates a real problem. And of course, what we'll do, we'll take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Whatever you want to say in reference to it, because I mean, a lot of folks don't seem to understand this. I mean, when we say that he has to pay child support, we only think in terms of whatever child support that comes in. But the state takes that money. If you got a job, the state takes your money
Child
before
support is not
you get your money.
Yeah, child support is not just taking money from you. Child support is being in that child's life.
Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Watkins in reference to child support in the state of Tennessee. And let's see, Phil, if we can pick up with you this morning, and to have you to talk to our audience this morning about some of the issues that you have to face if you have to pay child support, and how long that child support can be, and et cetera. And then you say as much as you wish to about it over the next 10 minutes. And then Mr. Watkins will end us for the day with some of his observations in reference to it. Let's do it from that perspective.
Right now, child support, currently you got to pay child support as long as that child is attending high school or they go to college, you still got to pay child support. And which in terms of that, it hurts the father, it hurts the whole family. We're trying to keep families together. We keep unity in the family, the mom and dad not arguing, everybody having, getting along. The kids can be more productive going to school. They're not listening to argument all night. The dad and mom having, everything going all right. But with this child support how it is now, it's just too much chaos in the home. The father not making the money he's supposed to make. He better can take care of himself. Then the state taking half his check, so he coming home with a half a check to take care of his family of 3 and 4. So that leads them to a broken cycle of despair. I mean, alcoholism, drug addiction, all that, comes in a part of it because the man's get to the man, what can I do? I'm just out here, And we're just trying to change a lot of that. We got a program now. We're trying to do it 90 days. Get each father 90 days. No child support. 90 days to get themselves together. Get a job, get yourself together, stand up. And then the child support can start taking something out. Work out a little modification program with the father. What you can still get a mother $100 a month. But that's a whole lot better than taking half a man check. It's giving a man some kind of hope that he can be productive, he can go home, he can buy his kids a decent pair of shoes, diapers or whatnot. But right now how they got it, we just losing battle. We have to reform this.
And so, Mr. Watkins, there are a large number of men, not only African-American men, but specifically we're concerned about African-American men today in reference to what we're talking about here. But there are a large number of African-American men that get caught up in this system of child support. If they get a job, you're telling us, then whatever that pay is, the state intervenes and takes part of that money before he can get the. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes.
Talk about that.
When a man goes to court, I've been in a court situation where a judge actually told me, I'm living in the household with my kids, the mother and everything, and asked me was I paying child support, and I said, yeah. I'm thinking they're going to say, okay, you in the household, so we're going to stop it. He asked the mother, was he helping? He told me, yeah. Turn around, the judge told me keep paying. That's just one of the situations. Another situation is when a woman can call, a man can get out of jail. After he done his 81 days, 82 days, he can get out of jail, and they'll give him a review date to go back to court. And in that review date, that woman has the ability to call the judge and say, I want to speed up the process. So if that man doesn't have a job within that time the judge has allowed, well, guess what? He's going out back to jail.
So child support in the real sense has the ability to land folks almost immediately in jail,
Oh, yes, sir.
and then
That's
take
what-
half of the paycheck and
And on top of that, not only that you go to jail, but you also still pay child support.
Yeah,
While
child
you're
support
sitting there.
still accumulating.
So it's a law, they say, and there's nothing. It doesn't stop. It just does not stop. Just because you sitting up there doing 90 days, 80 days, 6 months, 8 months, it doesn't matter. Just still gonna keep paying. You still gonna keep paying in one way or the other. While you sitting there in jail doing nothing, or you sit out here in the streets doing nothing, they still gonna want that money.
Now the
And
state that
days-
done away with the father. What's going on with the kids at home then? You know, the father not here. What's going on with the kids? The son growing up, he watching the neighborhood drug dealer. The daughter growing up watching her brother with the money. She want a boyfriend with the money now. She got a broken cycle. Here she goes, she's in the projects, she's pregnant with a couple of kids. The cycle continues. We have to reform this child support. But like you said, the black man, we in trouble. We won't have a second generation. How things going now? We got too much going against us as it is. You know, we trying to stand up and man up. We going out here every day. We feeding the homeless. I mean, we buy with our own personal money. You know, socks, T-shirts, take to the homeless camps. We feed them hot dogs, hamburgers. You know, we go to the inner city, take over the kids, reading books at schools. We doing all this to show these kids that, you know, they look forward to seeing us. We got a junior Firebird football program coming up out of Pearl High School. We with those guys every day, the little fellas. We teaching them along the way, you know, how to man up, how to be young men, you know, by reading skills and math skills. So it is things that men can do out here that we are positive. You know, instead of keep getting a bad rap for all this violence, it's good men out here, and we just want to be known.
You know, I mean, you know, and then another thing about it, the state does also use the child support system. They make it seem like it's benefit the woman, but they also what is also doing is manipulating her to get that man out the house because they'll tell the woman, okay, well, if he's not, well, we're gonna make him pay, or we're gonna send him to jail. And by the time the woman's got fed up with so much stuff, you know, her mind is going in a whirlwind, and she's looking like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? So when the arguments start inside that household, when that fighting starts in the household, then that man is pushed out that household, and if he starts getting on his feet trying to do better, that woman gonna want a piece of it right now. And say, well, he got it, we need to go get it right now. So you got to give a person a chance enough to say, hey, okay, you got to let a man be a man and let him in his household and work it out. Because you keep pushing him outside the household, you just continue destroying that house. And when you do that, then that's when you're going to see a whole lot of jail system filled up. I look at this, you know, I think they building up another jail right now.
Modern day slavery.
Well, look here. Is there any effort, and I think that you've already mentioned that there's an effort on your part to deal with the state legislature to pass a law and et cetera. What would such a law be like? And,
We're looking for
what would such a law say?
There'll be a 90-day program. In this 90 days, a man can man up, get a job, get himself together, get housing, get adequate clothes to go get a proper, you know, a job, a better job if need be, where he can reach a child support level or balance out. Okay, within this process, each month he would get a mom in return $100. You know, he's trying to get himself back up, just redeem himself. You know, that's what we got to do. We have to have that 90 days before they got a bill out now that's saying when you go to the custodial parent and y'all can make an agreement to pay your child support on time for a year and they'll waive all your back pay. But these men need some immediate. You know, what if they don't have adequate shoes to go to an interview? Give them a chance to get on their feet where they can be productive citizens and then go into it.
A person who might be arrested, Ms. Watkins, we're saying, for not paying child support, that he serves his time, and as soon as he's out of jail, he's been in jail for whatever that time might be, and as soon as he's out of jail, he has to immediately start paying child support.
That's right.
Is that what we're saying? And that's why you feel that there ought to be some kind of reform within the system.
Help us out. We gotta give us a time frame. You know, 90 days. We can get out, get on our feet, get a nice decent job, get adequate clothing. You know, to be productive. If you're just coming out of jail, you're behind. You know, everybody needs a system. Sometimes there's a lot of men who didn't choose the right path, but a lot of men who have. You have men in the household that's all working, that's all taking care of their kids, and they still is in the child support system. You know, so it's a no-win situation for us.
So it's a real problem when a mother decides that she's going to have that individual, her husband, to pay child support, that has created a real problem for him. Is that what?
Oh yeah, because you're taking a man's self-esteem away from him, because you know, a man that's living inside a household, taking care of his kid, prides himself off of that. You know, and when you keep talking about money, 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 and then this man go out and work a legal job, and you make him feel like, hey, it's not enough money. You know, you taking his self-esteem down to where that'll break a man down to the point where he start doing other things. And like I said, destruction could come to where you could be turned to alcoholic or drug abuse and all that. And it's just a lot. It's a wide variety of things that could happen. And that's why we're like, okay, let's see if we can get together and talk to the mayors, the governors, legislators, and stuff to see how we can get the man and the woman back to working together as one to bring it back to the household and build these households up and build these kids back up to where it's supposed to be.
And so over the last 10 seconds we have here, so that's the objective of your organization, to sort of bring the state legislature and others together to deal with this as an issue. And of course, let me thank the two of you for coming by, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week to another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.
Yes, I have.
Got a lot of it. And so we want all your information.
Give me a motion. Let's count to 10 for me.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2.
All right. The growth of Nashville and the issue of housing, Pastor K. Walker and Mr. Zerker. Okay, John Zerker.
That's correct, sir.
I got it. I should have written it Z-E. See,
No, you're doing fine, sir.
okay, well,
Mike check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pastor Kelvin L. Walker, Nashville, Tennessee. Been living here all my life. And still alive. So I'm all good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
the growth of Nashville and the issue of housing. That's a real issue. And so, Mr. Zerker, that the homeless population and all those things fit into this, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, well, that's it. You know, tell us all the bad things about it, you know, or the good things, or whatever anything you want to say about it, this is your forum, you see. And so anything that you say about it, you want to talk about it. Okay, we're ready. We'll be ready in a minute. And we'll start off, and then first 6 minutes will be background education experience. Now, when we talk about that, he's going to give us some information in reference to his background. Now, we'll start with you. I'll introduce him as Pastor K. Walker and you as Mr. John Zerker. Okay, and then we'll, after I introduce the two of you, then we'll start with you to give us. Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is the growth of Nashville and housing. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the growth of Nashville and housing this morning, Pastor K. Walker and Mr. John Zerker. And of course, let me welcome you, Pastor Walker and Mr. Zerker, to the show this morning, and to tell the two of you how delighted we are to have you here this morning. Let's start off with you, Pastor Walker, by having you and Mr. John Zerker to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences. And we'll start with you, and then Mr. Zerker will be able to give us basically the same information in reference to his situation. Okay. And by that time, we should be out of the first segment, and then we'll go into that second segment. But first, let's start off with you, Pastor Walker, by having you give us that information.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Haynes. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with you on your show. Done quite a few shows with you over the years, and it's always a pleasure to be in your presence. My name is Pastor Kelvin L. Walker, born here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'd say I had some pretty good parents, hard-working parents that taught me the right way to go. I was educated in the public school system here in Tennessee. Was kind of a bad guy in school. Eventually got kicked out of high school. My first year of high school, I got kicked out of Hillsborough High School. because I was, like I say, I was just one of those undesirable characters at the time. I got in some trouble early in my life. At age 15, I actually shot a guy and ended up going to the military as a way to escape being incarcerated. I spent a little time in the United States Navy, and from there I got out of the Navy and went to OIC, Opportunities and Industrialization Center. And from there I got spent 6 months in there getting my GED prep classes and stuff, and got a GED. And then I went on to Tennessee State University for a short period of time, wanting to become a fashion designer. And mind you, all during that period of time I was on drugs and had a drug addiction and everything, which eventually derailed my college pursuits right there, and ended up incarcerated in the state prison system, and there spent a total of 5 years of my life incarcerated in the prison system. Got out of there, still actively involved in crimes and drug addiction and everything, and then in August 24th of 1986, God divinely stepped into my life, snapped the chains of my drug addiction and called me directly into ministry, and now that's what I'm out here now, you know, serving God by serving and meeting the needs of people.
Very good. Mr. Zerker, what about you?
Well, like I said, my passion is social justice, and it started at 13 years old. When I was at Washington Junior High, we were excused to go and march and protest.